Hello and welcome to A Walking the Woods. I'm Perrin Woods, your host, and here joining me today is Elliot.
Hey, what's up?
Leo.
Hi.
And Nalin.
Hey.
So, A Walk in the Woods is a podcast that we release on some sort of schedule where we research topics to share with each other and our listeners. Today, we're going to have some interesting stuff. We got some stuff about education. We got some stuff about music.
Wild.
We got some stuff about attention. And we got some stuff about language. It's going to be cool keeping those vague. So, let's have Elliot start us off.
Okay, so my topic for this week, this episode, I should say, is the R&B and hip-hop movement coming out of Asia right now. So, mainly what's been happening is in the recent years there's been an upsurge of Asian hip-hop and R&B artists and some rappers. The most notable one, he's actually now going by Joji.
I've heard of him.
Yeah.
I think everybody has. If you're a kid in the 21st century, then...
Yeah, so his real name is George Miller, and his performing stage name is Joji. His music is mostly R&B. It's very, upbeat, very instrumental, with very, melancholy lyrics over it. So, very, dumbed down lyrics, almost washed out, which I absolutely love. So he's currently signed on to AWitW, who has also signed on notable artists like Rich Brian, the Higher Brothers, August 8th, Nicki, and Keith Ape. And so...
I know Nicki. She's my band teacher.
No, so... So 88 Rising is a media company coming out of Asia right now, and they produce a lot of music. So the next notable person would be Rich Brian. So he started off when he was if my facts are correct, which I'm almost 100% sure that they are, he was 14 and he started recreating the beats of popular American hip-hop songs, and he showed it to his friends, and when he was 16, he put out his first real song called Dat Stick, which is a fantastic song. It's hilarious.
I've heard that.
I love it so much.
You got thoughts on it, Leo?
It's cool. It's it's really interesting, because he's Indonesian, isn't that correct?
Yes, he's Indonesian.
And it's just it's cool because you kind of see this this diversity and this kind of diversifying, if that's the right word, of hip hop, of the movement. It's kind of been it's been American for a long time, but there's kind of a growth of a movement in so many different places, like across the pond in England, I believe. There's some hip hop, and it's so cool that it's kind of becoming a thing in places like Asia and Southeast Asia, in China, I hear, and I think I think it's so cool, and I think that this guy Rich Brian is a cool example of this of a person who's listening to this American movement, and he's saying, I'm gonna do this too. I'm gonna start making beats at a very young age.
And he wants to put his own spin on it too. It's not like I want to be like them. It says I want to play in that style, but I want to do it my way.
Yeah. Right. Yes.
So I want to move on to other artists. Especially, it's a small group of artists, four people, the Higher Brothers. They're Chinese
I've heard of them.
rappers.
Yeah.
They are fantastic. And so I don't know much about August 8th, Nicki and Keith Ape, but Joji, Rich Brian, Keith Ape, no, not Keith Ape, everyone except Keith. So Nicki, Joji, Rich Brian, August 8th, the Higher Brothers, they all collaborated on a summer album called Head in the Clouds, and which is a fantastic one. They have a song where all of them are together singing. But I want to move on from like the posse over to just specifically Joji. He just released Ballads 1 on October 26th of this year, and it is crazy. It reached number 1 on the R&B and hip-hop division of the Billboard's 200 album list. And it went to be like 3rd or 4th in the world out of all of them. So it was extremely popular. And that includes, fan favorite songs like Slow Dancing in the Dark, which is one of my favorite songs. Yeah, Right, and Can't Get Over You. So those are, some just like fantastic songs that came off the album. All the songs are fantastic, but those are, extremely notable ones. But what I like most about this movement is all the hip hop and R&B and everything that's coming from America. You're getting different sounds, but it all sounds like it's from America. And with this new movement coming out of Asia, it sounds completely different.
But it's still the same genre.
It's the same genre. It's the same. Yeah, it's the same like. Right. Actual but it completely completely mixes up the. All the music.
So this reminds me a lot of like K-pop and J-pop. How there's these American style pops. Like it's still a pop genre, but it's been taken by, like in this specific example, South Korea and Japan, and they've put their own spin on it, created it in their image, and like you're saying that this is a new movement. I wonder if there's going to be similar things for like. I'm sure that there already are a couple artists, but I'm talking like larger movements of like this scale, where with more American genres, and or if maybe there will be something in reverse. Who knows? I think that I would be interested in looking to it. This reminds me. It's like one of the things that I've heard is America's number one export, the thing we export the most, is culture. And I think this is a great example of that. Is that this American culture is having worldwide influence, and while everybody's putting their own spin on it, which that's what you would expect, it's still originally an American, it's a Western world American movement. And I'm interested in waiting for, or when we hopefully see something in reverse. I would be intrigued to see like something from China become have
redone
something
by Americans.
I would love to see more of a cultural exchange rather than one country just pumping out stuff. I think they would make just a more interesting world.
And I think this can really connect to the age of the internet, because we all have grown up in this world where everything's connected through the internet, and I think that music is a part of that, because there's so much music that is just uploaded onto the internet on places like SoundCloud, on YouTube, on Spotify, and people from different places listen to it, and they want to do something like that. Because K-pop is like, I feel like it's as big as American pop, even maybe bigger. There's so many fans of it.
And you can blame that. I think that's 100% the internet's doing. I think that there would not be anywhere near as a worldwide fan base if it wasn't able to go expand with the internet. And I think what Elliot was saying, like there's this artist who like at 14 and 16 he was already working on things. I would assume how old is he now?
19 or
really?
He's really young.
His success, I don't know much about him, but I would assume that his success is totally because he has the tools of the internet. Like, he's able to share his music, and that allows him to grow regardless of his age, because he doesn't have to be performing there in person. He just has to produce something and share it.
And I just want to say, Rich Brian, when he put out Dat Stick, he had a huge, it blew up like completely. It has just like couple weeks ago, it hit over 100 million views.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot.
It was crazy. He got like a ton of traction, gained a lot of fans, and
That's not something you could do in previous centuries.
yeah.
I
One
agree.
thing that was really cool is he had all his friends dressed up in like all black. It was like 3 or 4 of them, and they were all black. They had like guns, and they were like had cars, and they were like acting like gangsters. And then he just had a pink polo, like a washed out pink polo, a fanny pack, and khakis, which I absolutely loved. And yeah, like he's had this amazing outlet with the internet and with YouTube, and like 88 Rising, they've helped grow him, and like that whole thing with just all the technology connecting us, he's able to grow into, he was able to move to LA. Like he's currently based out of LA, so
Yeah.
he's like with the internet, it's creating amazing things that like
Right.
all the music, all the
Yeah.
culture.
And it's pretty positive because we get to listen to all this music. Like previously, we were kind of in a bubble. I feel like earlier on, like
It's the producers who get to choose what can have success on a national scale. I would argue it's who stocks the stores, who chooses what's on the radio. Whereas now you've got so many programs where it's really who does everyone support. Well, I mean, you could get into arguments of like, well, corporate producers are all like, let's push this onto people so that it becomes popular because we want it to be popular. But I think that there's a lot more like people get to choose who gains popularity by just voting with their ears. They choose what to listen to, and I think that can, especially on like on platforms like SoundCloud, something like that. If there hasn't been like a famous artist, speaking of like I don't know, like Drake or Taylor Swift, like someone who's really quite famous and has a lot in the industry of recording. If there's not like something like that that's taking over SoundCloud at the time, you could probably find a lot of like artists who base their careers off the internet, and they're succeeding because people chose to listen to them. Yeah.
right.
Elliot, do you have anything more to add?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't see much that I have. I guess like I can just answer some questions if you guys have any
Yeah, sure.
about them. Just
Well, my question is, how many of the groups or how many of the individuals are multilingual? Because that would like I find that idea so cool. The use of different languages in hip hop and R&B or pop music, because it's putting a spin on it. So how many, I know that's a big
So,
question
yeah,
because there's
yeah,
so
yeah.
many musicians out there, but like, are there a lot of multilingual?
yeah, so Joji, he is multilingual. He speaks. He used to live in Japan, so he speaks Japanese and he speaks English.
And does he sing or does he rap in Japanese?
No, he doesn't perform in Japanese.
Okay.
So, Rich Brian, I know he lived in Indonesia, so he might speak another language. I've only heard him talk in English, so I know that he does speak English. And Keith Ape, I know he at least speaks a little, because during an interview, Joji was saying with this movement, you don't have to understand the words. Like I listen a lot to Loverboy 88 and Storm, and these songs by the Higher Brothers. They're all in other languages, and like I can still totally vibe to them. And he was saying that about Keith Ape. He was like, I don't understand what Keith is saying on his songs, but I say like, yeah, good job, keep going. He's like, oh yes, thank you. Like,
Music is the language. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what they're
Yeah.
singing.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I know that.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So yeah, there are some multilingual or bilingual people in this movement. So.
That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, speaking about language.
Oh, yes.
Segue right in.
Yeah.
So, I have a cool topic. I just chose the topic yesterday because I was like, what should I do? And I was like, oh, I remember. I heard about this language called Esperanto, but I don't really know too much about it. So last night I was like, all right, let's get this over with. Let's do an article. You know, I don't have a lot of time. Let's see. And I got to this New Yorker article about Esperanto. And I read it, and it was the most inspiring thing. And I went on, like, 11 at night just looking at, like, all these different things about this language. And so I'm really happy to share this, because this is, like, the coolest thing I've learned this week. And I really hope that you guys are as excited, as, you know, inspired by it. So I think I'll just start. So,
Ooh,
Esperanto.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just saw you. You got a good page full of notes there.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's nice and full.
Yes.
Sorry,
Okay.
continue.
Oh, of course. Okay, so Esperanto is a language. I think
It
most
is.
people know that. But Esperanto is not a language like an ancient language, like maybe Latin or French, Italian, German. It was made in 1887, and it was made up by this guy by the name of Ludovic Lazarus Zamenhof, right? So this
Wow,
guy...
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
This guy is most inspiring. This guy is a genius, right? So this guy is an eye doctor, right?
Yeah.
So he was in medical school, and this guy's studying, I'm not sure the whole name for it. It's a really long name, because, all, like, cool doctor names are really, really long. Okay. So this guy went to medical school, but you have to learn about this guy to really understand about Esperanto and what it means. So he grew up in a city called Bialystok. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it was in Russia, and now it's in Poland. And so as he was growing up, he lived in this place, in this city that was very, like, multi-ethnic. It was very diverse. There were Polish people, Jewish people, Germans, Russians, and they all spoke different languages. And there was conflict. There was a lot of conflict during this time, and in his city, and he thought it just stemmed from this conflict from different groups. And at this time, there's a lot of anti-Semitism going around in the world. And one thing about him is that he was Jewish, right? And he grew up.
Though I heard that in AP Euro we've been learning Poland was actually like the most. Poland was still generally anti-Semitic,
Right.
But they were the most. They were one of the more tolerant of Jewish countries. They were one of the more tolerant ones. Really, it was especially other countries that were much less tolerant.
Right, but
it still wasn't a
right.
place.
And so it's all around Europe, and I'm sure in America. Forgive my ignorance about the topic,
That's
but there is a lot of conflict that he notices between groups of people, and he grew up, and he kind of learned about the Zionist movement. As a Jewish person, and he started to study this idea that Jews should have a holy land, a place where they can be protected from these ideas of anti-Semitism, and so he kind of followed this idea for a long time. And then something happened, and he decided, no, I don't really believe in this anymore. He kind of saw this as a nationalist movement, and he rejected it because instead of seeing the world as he wanted to protect different groups of people, he thought, no, we should unite people. We should be together against conflict. And so he started studying language, and he worked really hard. He was in medical school. This guy's amazing, right? He has a family. And so he decided that barriers in language is that idea is really influential, and it causes a lot of conflict between groups. And so he rejected nationalism, and he embraced these basic religious values, like God is with us, God is inside of us, he's the he or she, whatever, is the kind of force in ourselves. And so he really wanted to unite people. And so he was less than 20 years old when he started working on this idea, this new language. Yeah. So he had this idea that he wanted to create a language with which everybody learned. He wanted to be this easy language, a combination of different languages that people can learn and people can unite around. He wanted this to be just a common language, this new powerful language in the world. And so he created this language. He didn't call it Esperanto at the beginning. He called it something around the lines of like the language that unites, or something like a
something long.
Right, right. And so I believe that he called himself Dr. Esperanto, and I think and I'm not sure what that really meant, but people began to see it, and they were like, oh, Esperanto, that's a good name.
Yeah.
And so he started publishing books and making these grammar rules. And so he got a following. There were leftists and radical thinkers who thought, this is so cool, we need to unite people. But there were also other people who just were interested in the language. They were like, whoa, this is so cool. There's this interesting concept that there's a new language coming out. I want to learn about this. So there's different followers of his ideas. And there were some people who rejected it, some people who thought it was not a good idea. And as he gains a following, as Esperanto gains a following, how do you bring people together to talk about this language? So he used this. He essentially brought people together in conferences, essentially, right? Like a bunch of people uniting around in a place to talk with each other and share ideas.
So, was this basically like conferences where it's like, how can we improve the language? Like, let's get a bunch of people who speak different stuff. And was this like how it evolved? Like they kept doing these conferences and adding more and more?
Well, actually, I'm not quite sure too much about that. But the thing about these conferences, I think they were just based around Esperanto and people speaking it and people trying to learn it more. And he did create this language a lot on his own, but he wanted people to add to the language, and people did add to the language. It was really people worked together to work on this.
So how many languages, like bits of languages, actually make up Esperanto?
Well, I'm gonna talk about the makeup of the language a little later.
Okay.
Sorry. But I'm gonna finish this history aspect of it.
All right.
So when he was doing these conferences and these big congresses, as he called them, I think, there was a lot of anti-Semitism in places like France and all around Europe, and people started to distrust him, and people thought, and some supporters of Esperanto were like, don't let them know that you're Jewish, because you're just gonna reject this idea. And so he worked really hard, and he worked against these anti-Semitic values. He really wanted he wanted to bring this language. He wanted to work on this language. He kept working on it. Now let's talk about the language.
All right,
shall we? That is a pretty interesting transition.
Can I just say,
Yeah.
and we said this. You said it a little while ago. His age when he was making it, he was a youngin' boy. He was a young boy.
He was a
like,
young man. Oh man, yes.
Big young.
He was working hard. He was working so hard.
I think that I think that you can argue that it's easier for youth to see ways that they can change things just in general.
Totally.
And I think that you can see that now and previously, it's really younger people who who have greater visions of change.
Oh yeah.
I think that because they have, it's almost like because they have less experience with some of the older things, they see, like, they have a much more new view on things. They only know things as
I
they
agree.
are in that smaller amount of time that they've been alive. And I
Right.
think that allows for, like, it allows for a view that, like, you can I think that you can see more clearly what should change, whereas if you've been alive for a long time, well, yeah, no, you totally can bring up ideas that are great for
Right,
change.
right.
I
Yeah.
think that more experience, I think, just makes it harder for... I think that makes it more difficult to see how things can change. I think that
Mhm.
it makes you more, like... I don't know. Anyways, Leo, tell
Yeah.
us about the language.
Okay, so this is the coolest part. This is so cool. So
We should open with that then.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Oh, no.
So
Okay.
so it's derived from mostly Romance languages, but also Germanic languages, right?
Right.
So if you speak a Romance language like maybe French or Spanish, Italian,
Spanish.
or
yeah, Spanish. apparently.
and also if you speak Germanic languages, but
Right.
it sounds like a Slavic language. That's a really
Whoa.
cool
That's
part of
my
it.
kind of language.
Uh-huh. So
Is it?
here. I have
Slavic.
written in all caps on my sheet. Very easy, because it is so easy. Let me tell you why. Okay, you guys know that, like, in different languages there are genders for nouns, right? So for example, in French there's le and la, right? Masculine and feminine. Le couteau, like the knife. La fourchette, which means the fork, right? They're different. Why is one le and why is one la? Like, what? I don't understand. And people who learn languages are like so confused. They're like, why does this exist? Guess what? No gender. For the most part, there is no gender in this language. Meaning that there's no nouns with gender.
So
That
so
is-
it's not
so-
so it's not like but there is like the he and she
There is.
pronouns,
For-
right?
it's-
But
it's
it's not
For
um,
humans and for like
Right.
actual animals.
Okay,
Yes.
but
That
it's
is-
not. But it's not like in German where you have like der, die, and das.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's the
Okay.
worst part about German.
It's more like
Yeah.
it's like how in English we don't have to have those, like, different gendered versions of words.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
which is great.
the fun doesn't stop, guys. There is more about this language. This is so cool.
This is
But
where,
wait, there's more.
this
Okay.
is where the fun begins.
So,
Yes.
nouns in this language end with O. They do that for the most part. This is great. Like,
So you can just tell what a noun is. more
yeah,
easily?
this just ends with O. And OJ if it is plural. Now,
Oh, interesting.
adjectives end in A, and they end in AJ if they are plural.
So do you pronounce the J or is like the J like an H or something like
I
that?
think it's more like an H, but that's a difficult thing because I think that's a little like Slavic. Like I think that's
Well, if
like,
I
you
mean
don't really
it would be
pronounce
like
J.
a Germanic, a northern
Oh,
Germanic
yeah.
language kind of a
Mhm.
thing,
Yeah.
but
right.
yeah, or even Spanish, but
Right, yes. But guys, we've talked about this, but this is really gonna get you pumped.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Okay, verb conjugations are the same. Think about this, right? If you have a verb, right, we're gonna call it to learn, right? And in Esperanto, it is lerni. And that's I've started talking like it's French. It's not French. Lerni. Okay, this is I can't pronounce it correctly, guys. I don't speak Esperanto. So all nouns, not nouns. Sorry, all verbs end in I, right? And that's the like the infinitive, like that's like to learn, learni, right? Now, I learn, mi lernas.
Right.
You learn, vi lernas. He,
Wait.
she, it learns. Il, si, ji lernas. Ni lernas, we learn. Vi lernas, you all
Right.
learn. Ili lernas.
So
AS at the end. That's
is
so
taken-
cool.
That is taken from German.
That is so close to
straight-
German, yeah.
Yes.
Straight up taken from German
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a
yeah.
little
that
bit
is
of
great.
modification.
Yeah,
Isn't
no,
that
it's
so
just like,
cool though?
That is really cool.
That's it's
yeah,
so easy
that's
to
amazing.
Okay.
So
I'm gonna learn this language.
Okay. So for past, future, and conditional tenses, right? They're just different suffixes, right? So at the
Right.
so for present, if it's just like lernas, like the as at the end. but for past, future, and conditional, they just change the ending, right? And also, this is like something that happens in Germanic languages. Verbs or words are created by mixing different words / ideas. So as you can see, this language is really cool. It's so easy to learn, and I think that you can't talk about Esperanto without talking about the ideas that surround it, ideas of unity. And so I would strongly encourage anybody listening to this to learn Esperanto, because it is so very easy, right? You'll learn so much, and you'll learn about Romance languages, about Germanic languages. You'll have a new idea. You can talk to people online, because in this age we're so connected. There are communities of people, and you can learn it in so many different ways online. You can learn it from this site called Duolingo. You can learn
they have it on Duolingo?
They do.
Really?
There's a site called Learnu, where you can learn Esperanto. You could just look up ways to learn Esperanto. There's a site, and it gives you like 5 different examples. Most of them are free. You just click on them, you start learning, and it's amazing, right? It's easy to learn. It's fast.
So
why don't we speak this all over the world?
That's the question.
Why is it arguably small communities of people speaking this?
So here's the thing. English is basically English has taken up this role as a language that unites people, because so many people speak English. English is a second language in a lot of different countries, in so many different places,
I'm also going to argue that the reason that English stays that way is because it's become the language of the internet, because a lot of the internet is focused on the United States and Western culture, which is pretty heavily English. That means that like people who have to work with the internet generally are like they want to learn English, because English is like it's becoming the it's a lot of the language of the internet. Of course, you see contention from like China, especially where China basically has their own internet. That's where it's all going to be in Chinese.
Right.
Also, like if you're coding, I don't know if there are translated versions of coding languages.
But they may just all be in English?
They might just mostly be in English, because that's the way that they were originally done. It would make sense that they would be that way because of their originality. But that would, for coders that maybe don't natively speak English, maybe that's another reason.
So
I don't know though.
I am really interested in this language. I very much want to learn it.
Yes.
And in the future, if we all learn this, we gotta do an episode.
Okay, this would be a
special episode in Esperanto.
This would be so cool. What if we all learn it and then we just speak it with each other? It's easy. Okay, it's so easy to learn. Just hop on. Okay, be open to this idea.
Yeah.
It's really easy to learn. And, like, why not learn this language? It's so cool. It's a good use of time. It was advertised originally that you could learn it in, like, 2 weeks.
Oh,
you can. Honestly, you can.
Well, how many hours approximately do you know if you have to actually sit down and...
I don't know, but in its original format, when there were books being created a long time ago, in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, it was advertised as you can learn this so easily. There were these easy manuals, and it's a lot of times you have to pay to learn languages online. There are different sites that you can learn languages. You might have to get a tutor or something, or take a lesson. But it's just so open. People are I don't want people to pay for this. This needs to be just open to everybody should learn this language.
Yeah.
And in the age of the internet, it's being spread so much. There are I think I got this from a different source, but I think it might be about 2 million native speakers of Esperanto, and this means
as a secondary language, or as a
it is basically a second language.
Okay.
There is no place that speaks Esperanto, right? There's no place.
There's no
that
small communities in
Israel
or something.
Yes.
Okay.
But people parents give children you should learn this cool language, and people start people start to learn it from a young age because it's so cool.
So I'm gonna bring up a question here.
Yeah.
is it better to have a completely universal language? Every person in the world is learning. Let's say that in the future, every person in the world is learning Esperanto. Is that going to be... Would it be better to have this universal language at the cost of losing some, at the cost of losing some languages that are culturally unique, or is it better to have these cultural differences and just try and work around them? I actually think that, personally, I think that it works
both ways.
I think that you don't... I kind of... While it would be easier to talk in an international setting with having, multiple... with only one language that you have to talk in, I think that it's better the way that... with people having their own languages. I think that works much better because it creates a more knit sense of community. I think it's better to have... I would rather have those differences in language and have to work around that by learning other languages and learning about other people than having everyone have to learn the same language and have it be the same. I think that is... I think that I like that idea.
No,
I still think there are workarounds to this, because you can have just a world language or something where everybody speaks it, but then you can also have the communal languages. So, you could have somebody speaking French in their community to their family, and then they'll go to school and they'll speak a universal language that everybody else speaks. So it has a business and outside of your community communicative properties, but when you're in your community or your country or whatnot, you'll speak that region's language.
I think that if it were to become a universal language, the best way to do it would have it take the place of where English is in a lot of countries now. Don't have it be the first thing people learn. Have it be something secondary. Teach it in schools at teach it in schools starting at 3rd or 4th grade or something, where you have the basis. You have a strong base in your native language, but you're not starting it old enough that you lose interest and easy to learn. Start it at an age where it's not so young that it's right there with your first language. Start it so that it is a secondary language, but you know enough of it to communicate fluently in it. I think that would be the elegant solution that would provide the least loss of provide a lower loss of individuality.
And I agree with this guy Zamenhof. I agree with his fundamental ideas that these language barriers, they kind of do divide us in a way, and I think we should unite. I think we should people from different countries should kind of share ideas, and they should learn about each other. And I think the best way to do that is to learn language. What do we have in common, right? We have art in common. We have language. We have cuisine. We have
music,
fashion. Exactly.
Music,
these are things we share, and language is one of the most important because it's a way we communicate. It's a big part of our culture, and if we try to unite by learning a common language, we can learn so much about each other. And learning a language is fun. It helps you. It opens your mind to different ideas. If you just speak English, you might not learn about these different ideas that are just going around the world. You're kind of ignorant in a way. Not saying that people who just know English are ignorant, but when it comes to just learning one language, you're not seeing other languages. You're not seeing other cultures. And I think that learning a language like Esperanto, it can open your mind.
So on the topic of your mind.
Great transition.
These transitions are on point today.
They
So,
are.
on the topic of your mind, I've brought attention here. So,
I've already lost my
specifically,
attention.
attention in the age of technology.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, what were you saying?
Hey,
So-
goldfish man.
This joke is gonna go on for the whole thing, Perrin. You better be prepared.
So,
Glad you didn't start with this.
so the thing is, in this day and age, we have media everywhere.
Sorry, what?
Okay, we're done.
Alright,
Okay, we're done with that joke.
We have media and technology everywhere, at least in the United States. You cannot. It's so hard to, if you live in any sort of city setting, you cannot go about your day without encountering technology a ton. Whether you have a phone, a computer, there's billboards up in the billboards in cities and such. You're constantly being bombarded with media. It's become a bad thing to be bored.
Right.
We live in an age where if you're sitting somewhere for 5 minutes, you're going to take out your phone and read an article, play a game. You're going to take out
Social media.
a book even. You do not just sit there
And think. Right. And be bored.
Exactly.
Boredom is so cool.
Well,
You know what?
it's not,
Okay.
It's not that it's cool, it's that it's important.
Okay, here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Art comes out of being bored. Listen to okay, so like when you're sitting there and you're like, what should I do? Like sometimes you just think, I should make some art.
It inspires creativity.
Exactly.
Yeah, can
This is
I-
what people do. People are sitting down, they're like,
boredom is a necessary part
I'm bored.
of
I'm gonna make art.
the human psyche.
Yes.
And I think that is something that has been lost. We don't spend enough time getting lost, getting bored, thinking.
Yes.
Getting
because
lost in the sauce.
we don't spend enough time taking walks in the woods.
I'm just walking in the woods.
It just
Yeah.
Cue credits.
thinking and slowing down. We live in an age where productivity is everything. We
Right.
live in an age that's connected. It's all about what can you do next? How can you
Right.
achieve more? How can you do
How do you get more money?
How do you get more money? How do you be more productive?
How do you
more,
learn
more,
more?
more, more. Maximize your time. Do everything you can. We don't spend the time to slow down.
Right.
And so that brings us into how does this using of technology so much in that thing influence our attention? So I've read a couple articles, and they reference studies, and actually the coolest thing about this is there's a lot of studies that are happening on this. I believe that in the last 10 years there have been over 12,000 studies on
Whoa.
attention.
That's a lot.
Dang.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
attention is a humongous part of modern psychology because it's complicated.
Right.
So I found actually the most interesting thing to me here was that I found contradicting studies, and I think that this shows how the way that you come at a study is
Right.
really important in the result you gave.
Yeah.
So the first thing I read was Microsoft did a study, and they had this published on their website for a while.
Well, now
it's
I
not-
instantly don't trust them.
It's not down now. So the study, they found that human attention span is now less than that of a goldfish. So a goldfish has an attention span of about 9 seconds. They concluded that.
so
Let me
Hey guys,
continue.
why don't we just sit in silence for 9 seconds?
let me finish up here. So they concluded that humans now have an attention span of 8 seconds compared to
Oh
12
my
seconds.
god.
So I like Leo's idea. Let's just have 9 seconds of silence.
Ah!
Damn, that's you didn't even have enough time. That was 4 seconds. So
I need to be connected. I gotta catch up on my
So,
Snapchats.
the problem with this study was that it was done in an advertisement setting. This was for advertisers. How do we catch people's attention? We need them to look at things. They really actually didn't have much detail on their study. They just shared this data with only these numbers on the web page. And the thing is that changing in our attention is natural. This is not inherently a bad thing. It's not that it's, oh my god, the end of the world, we have attention span lower than a goldfish. Our attention spans change to the world around us. And that it doesn't, I don't think that you can argue that then a decreased attention span is inherently bad. It's more about how we need to use it. So that was like this first study I looked at. In a second article, this more focused on something else. So our brains are constantly predicting what's going to happen next, right? Like, we're constantly thinking, oh, how's this going to happen? Like, from previous research, like, the reason that we enjoy music is because we make predictions, like, subconsciously, and when our predictions come true, like, we get rushes of dopamine. Like, if you hear the first few things of a song, you can continue that in your head often if you know it well. And this happens because your brain needs to know the world. I would assume that this comes from like a primal thing. If you're constantly making predictions and taking in information, then if you, for example, like hear a certain rustle, you might be like, oh, that's a predator, I should run. And so your brain is learning a ton. And this all happens on these time scales, like, and this is even increasing in the modern world where you have like, you know, this meeting needs to be done by here. I think that like even in the way that I plan things, I notice that I try to put things on like in a schedule a lot. I think like, okay, this needs to be done by here so that I can fit in this, and this makes it harder for people to like go. It makes it harder for those periods of break. You're thinking like, how do I do something next?
Right.
Like, it makes it so that it's like, okay, I need there to be like, I checked my phone for 5 minutes. Okay, in 10 minutes I want to check my phone again. Something like that. And I don't know. That was interesting to me. So I don't actually have too much detail on this. I was finding a lot of contradicting stuff. I couldn't. I think that this links into what I'm going to talk about next. You find that when looking for information on the internet, it's often hard to find sources that you know are scholarly and especially unbiased, because it's impossible not to have bias.
Right, and
but
you know,
you can have, with minimal bias. So, third article I read was also different. These all have like different perspectives on attention in the modern world. This was about how it affects children, adolescents, people like 20 and under. So
us,
people who use young children who use technology often literally have different brains. Our brains function differently because we grew up with technology.
Sorry, by young children, so 20 and under, like the entire range?
Especially when people's brains are still developing, they develop differently because of exposure to technology.
Wow. Okay.
So, like, you learn to scan for information faster and more efficiently.
Right.
And, like, you can see this. If you try and engage, like, I don't know, like a grandparent in like trying to find like a news thing, I'm sure that a younger person is just going to be wired to be able to use the technology better. There might be exceptions, but we know we're more quickly looking for, okay, how can I get the most information in the least amount of time that's the most effective? That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
This actually allows for more creativity and more access to information sources actually almost at the same time. Like, we might have an easier job like trying to look at multiple articles, whereas like someone who's grown up without technology in their adolescence and younger childhood, they might not have that advantage of being able to like more easily focus on different articles at a time. Like, we're better at multitasking, humongously more so. And that comes from growing up with this technology. Just, we're used to it. We're used to the internet.
We're used to being always stimulated by something.
Always hooked in. And this can be hugely advantageous. Like, greater creativity. The more information you're having, the more I think that you could argue the more that you're able to like draw influences from things. Like nothing is true. I think you can argue that nothing is truly original. Everything is always influenced by something. Like you draw your influences from your experiences. I'm going to argue
from reading articles.
Like you come to conclusions from reading articles, and you can come to more rich, like informed conclusions the more that you take in and read. And I think that you can say like the same if you're going to go and write a book or write a musical piece. The more of that media that you can take in, like the more music that you enjoy and listen to, the more books that you really loved the way that the author wrote, you can take those influences and use it to create something of your own, pulling from all these different things.
But here's my thing. So if you're always, learning about these different influences, you're listening to different music and you're deciding, I want to make something like this. I want to try my hardest to do something like this. But you're always reading and you're always learning.
You don't have the time.
You don't have the time to be bored, and you don't have the time to think. Like, what do I do? Like, what should I do? You don't have the time to reflect on your life, and you don't have the time to say, you know what? I'm gonna create something. I'm gonna channel all of my creativity into something that has to do with me, that has to do with what I learn about the world, and putting it into other mediums, and trying to be as creative as I can. But if we're always stimulated, if we're always looking at something, if we're always thinking of something, if we're always looking towards the next thing, when do we have time to slow down and create art? Because that's human nature, is to create.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here, you can go ahead.
So I just want to say one of my greatest passions has come out of being bored. One day I was just absolutely bored. I was looking, like on Instagram, I was looking at jewelry and I saw wire wraps. And I decided that day that I wanted to make a wire wrap. And now I've been doing it for years and I love it. And that is why
it's your
boredom,
passion.
Yeah, it's a huge passion of mine. And that is why boredom is so important. We need to stop being so stimulated. We have to allow our technology to we have to allow the technology to just be alone. Like we just have to allow ourselves.
And we have to let
alone.
our brains work.
I want to actually say something interesting about what you said in that story. You said that you were bored browsing Instagram.
No, I was bored. I was bored, and I decided just to look on Instagram and just on the web of just jewelry in general. I was just bored. I was like, okay, whatever. I'm in I just
and you drew those influences.
Oh, you were looking for ideas.
I was looking for ideas to do.
I'm going to argue that the boredom helped, and then your ability to know how to use the technology well was what allowed you to come up with that creative influence. Because,
but if I had
you came up with the idea of I want to look at that, and then you actually came up with what you wanted to do by using the technology. I think that is really intriguing to me.
Yeah.
It's a combination of what we were talking about.
Right.
You still were quite connected when coming up with what your idea there.
Mm-hmm.
You came up with it by looking at stuff, but you didn't think I want to do this without being bored first.
Because it comes from two different ideas: inspiration and boredom. That's what creates art. You're bored. You're like, what do I do? And then you're inspired. You just this meaningfulness. It just kind of comes, and you're like, whoa! I saw this before. I saw this amazing painting. I feel like I want to recreate it. I want to work really hard to put my creativity into that, and it comes from boredom. It comes from boredom and inspiration, and when those two kind of unite, I mean, I feel really pretentious talking about this, but I'm not the expert on everything.
These are our thoughts. It's not that we're saying that we
know everything.
We're not saying that for certain, but it's our thoughts and opinions. It's the conclusions that we're coming to.
Ah, yes.
So let me talk a little about the disadvantages here. And again, I think that this can be contradicted. All of this stuff that I'm bringing up, it's you can completely contradict. You can only really get the information. It's not about coming to conclusions. And the problem with a lot of I would argue that a difficulty with psychological research is that it's really hard to draw conclusions that are truly conclusive, and like that's definitely what's happening because brains are really complicated. And so, like, it's easy to collect the data, but I don't know. It might be hard to collect the data, but drawing conclusions can create a lot of. You can get a lot of contradiction. So, with that in mind, this article that I read about, it's actually I think a textbook page about the influence of technology on children means that they have a lower working memory capacity, not memory that is working, but something called working memory. And our brains become accustomed to constantly switching between tasks. And this causes a little bit of info to be lost. Like, I'll go back to that example earlier.
Right.
A grandparent who reads through one article entirely, slowly taking in every little point, might understand that article better just because of their more meticulous reading of it, compared to someone who might have read through the article, read through another, not quite just waiting to understand it fully, because they're trying to go filter through more information faster.
Stuff information into their brain.
Yeah.
Not really comprehending it.
Yeah. I would say this is kind of a quantity over quality style thing, but I think that, like, I think it would vary between person to person how much someone would understand an article by more skimming it. So my mother is taking a course on psychology with Cornell, and so she was, in fact, her course is actually about attention. It's
really?
literally this not attention compared to technology, but just the psychology of attention. I don't think that's the actual title
really cool.
of the course. But she was talking to me. Attention is built up of a bunch of different things. And I brought up some of the people who I think access technology a lot, who are like engaged with screens a lot of the time, are people who are not necessarily professionals, but like people who play video games a significant amount of time. And there have been plenty of studies that actually show that they're better at multitasking. Like they retain more of the information. And how I thought of this was, there's a lot of games that require you to think of and hold many different variables in your head. You're constantly processing
I feel that.
many different things. Like, okay, especially in like an online game, you're thinking like, okay, this person might be here and this guy's here. I'm gonna go to here. Like you're
From point A to point B.
Point A to point B it's not just I need to go here. It's I need to go here thinking of this.
Math,
Not even math, just you have to process a lot. There's a lot that you have to think about. And practicing that day after day after day after day, if you play a lot, that you can think of how that affects multitasking. Like my mother was saying, multitasking doesn't exist. You're not focusing on two things at once. You're rapidly switching between two things. And if you're playing these games where you're constantly like, okay, I'm thinking about this thing, right, I have to pay attention to that. You're getting this practice of switching, and you can see how that happens. I think that the real question to me is, how does that affect this concentration, just focusing on one thing? If you're used to switching between things, are you going to have a more difficult time just reading through one thing? Is that actually going to make it harder to slow down and think? Does it mean, like, that might encourage being engaged more? Like, yes, it has its benefits. I think that being able to multitask more efficiently, pay attention to more things, that's got to have a lot of usefulness in jobs. Like, you got to think that there's got to be plenty of jobs where it's much easier if you can effectively hold two things in your head. Pay attention to two things. You can do more work. Maybe you're not doing it to a super high standard, but if you can do it to a good standard and do two things rather than one, I think that is going to benefit you as an employee, or like as a thing for a hobby, much better. But
Right.
I don't know.
You know, I feel like there's this idea, you know, in this world, that it's all about work. You know, it's all about do this, do that, do this, do that. You know, learn as many things as I can and get as much money as I can. Go through the 5 day work week and stuff as much information into my brain as possible. Work as hard as I can. Be as productive as I can, and then I get to somewhere. But you know, what do you get to? You know,
Yeah.
I think life is more than just that. It's about slowing down, you know, being a human and letting your brain run and being creative. You know, it's always this chase. You know, what are we chasing towards?
Yeah.
What are we
We're
chasing towards?
chasing
Happiness?
gratification. I
Right.
just really messed up.
It's all right.
Well, I-
Gratification.
I think-
Gratification.
I would think that this is a guess, but I would assume the reason that you would be continuing towards something at the end of that is because you have something greater than it actually will be in your mind. That like you see a goal that you don't even know what's that goal, but
Right. You just want to
but-
get
well, no,
to it.
People
Yeah.
say like this is going to be better, and you get a lot of short-term rewards. Like if you're getting more and more money, a higher and higher salary, or something like that,
You get a
you're
better
gonna,
car.
Well, yeah, you're gonna get these little things. You might be able to say like, oh, hey, I can just buy nicer food. I can get like a lot of more quality of life things. Like, hey, oh, I want like this instrument for a hobby of mine. I can buy that, or something like that. You get a lot of these little rewards along the way, and I think that it really. Really, what you need to do is you just need to like stop and think more. Like in our, I think what you're saying, and I can agree with, is just in this world of constant people grabbing for our attention, like going back to the first study, how it was for advertisers of you need to create things that are less than 8 seconds long so that you can grab people's attention and make them buy your products with all these stimuluses.
Right.
I think it's best to try and remove yourself from them from now and again.
Think for a second.
Yeah, I
Or
was,
no, let your mind run for a second.
so, I saw a video by this author of some deep thought books, and he basically called it not dental. That's what it stems from. Digital hygiene, like stepping away, turning off the internet and your computer's just going away from it and spending time doing other things.
He says as he has 2 computers in front of him.
This is for my notes.
I know, but
and for the recording. So that was a very interesting topic. I just want to say we are
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
running short on time. I thought, okay,
Yeah.
well,
We're fine. We've
Yeah.
got-
I
got
thought we
time,
were
so.
gonna.
So,
Okay.
let's transition into our final thing. Speaking of attention and young people, education.
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 The young
So,
ones.
on a Friday.
One Friday.
This last Friday.
In our time.
In our time, yes.
Wait, yesterday or like 8
Yesterday.
days ago? Okay. Okay.
Down in Texas,
Down Texas.
the
so sorry
the Texas Board of Education voted on what to teach students
Big,
in terms
important.
of in
That's
terms of
important.
causes of the Civil War. And what they ended up saying was that they'll teach the essential role of slavery,
Right.
specifically in the Civil War. And actually, originally they taught sectionalism, in this order,
Right.
as like the three main causes: sectionalism, state rights, and slavery at the bottom.
What's sectionalism? Sorry.
Sectionalism?
I've actually never heard that term.
So it's Perrin, help me out with this. Sectionalism is a division of people, pretty much. Like is kind of.
Oh, like in the
Similar
country,
to
like
segregation?
well, that makes sense.
No, oh shoot.
Time for dictionaries.
Da-da-da-da.
So,
No,
Neon, how
Time
about
to
you?
edit this out.
So, how about you continue speaking while we grab the definition for sectionalism?
Yes.
Okay. So they taught sectionalism, states' rights, and slavery in that order, with sectionalism being the biggest reason. And this past September, Democrats suggested teaching slavery as the only option, but and proposed that teaching states' rights as like kind of an overall theme is going around the main reason, which which was slavery.
Right.
Though,
And this was counteracted by Republican board member David Bradley, proposing to still keep the other causes, but teach slavery as more of a reason.
I actually agree with the Republican person here. I think that it's better to have that larger variety. I think that I would argue that I think that it's ignoring a more nuance to situations if you're just saying slavery is the only the big cause. There's not really any other causes. I think that it's best to say slavery is the main cause, but there are these other causes too. I think that you have to include that, or else I think it becomes a little too like. I think that teaches. It tells a story that that people want to be told. It more moves away from a unbiased history.
Well, actually, on that, the final consensus. Elliot, I can't speak. Was that they would teach the central role of the expansion. And I quote: "The central role of the expansion of slavery in causing sectionalism, disagreements over states' rights, and the Civil War." So they would teach slavery as like the main option, but they would show that it also played roles in other reasons why we had the Civil War, which was sectionalism and disagreements over what states can actually do.
Okay.
Which I think that's still like that style of debate is still going on to this day. I mean, isn't that originally what like one of the big Democrat versus Republican divisions was back in the when the parties were more new? Wasn't that the original idea? Is that there were people who supported a greater federal control and people who said that no, states should have more control, and that was like the original Democrat versus Republican debate.
That was and then but then people this idea had already been around that slavery should be abolished, but it was brought more into the spotlight and presented as a bigger issue, and that's when you started having the divide between the South and the North.
Of course, I'm saying that was possibly a it was a secondary cause. That was what led to more of a two-party system that we have today compared to like more parties like the initial founding of the country. So, you guys looked up sectionalism yet?
Yes.
All right.
So,
I'll give you the actual Google
Google definition
thing.
All right.
Do you mind if I?
oh yeah,
go on,
sure.
Leo? So Google says sectionalism, noun, restriction of interest to a narrow sphere, undue concern with local interests or petty distinctions at the expense of general well-being.
So
It's kind of like looking in a bubble. It's like you have your own little bubble. You don't look at what else is in the world.
it's like if a bunch of these little towns had different opinions on something, and that stopped the general opinion from being like, if maybe it's like, okay, these 5 towns versus these 15 towns, the 5 towns have one opinion, the 15 towns have another opinion, but because they have different opinions, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm getting out of it, is like,
That sounds about right to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you got anything more to add, or?
On top of that, they were also discussing some other parts of the curriculum, and one thing that I thought, I found interesting was that originally they didn't have Hillary Clinton and Helen Keller in the social studies curriculum in Texas, in order to streamline the social studies standards. But they in the same vote that they did for teaching slavery as a cause of the Civil War, they also voted to reinstate Hillary Clinton and Helen Keller into the curriculum. But I just thought that was interesting, and
Yeah, I mean,
like, I feel like this, like, originally they were very, I don't want to say, I don't want to say that, but they're like, they were very, I mean, obviously they were very conservative on what they were teaching, but I feel like they were also just kind of very biased.
telling their own story.
Right.
And not really
telling a story from a specific standpoint.
Well, I think that
to what happened in history. But
an interesting thing of what you said there is that they were conservative in their ideas, but I'm interested in. I think that at the same time, despite Republicans often argue for what we consider conservative ideas, but I think in this situation, I would argue that it was the Democrat, at least when it came to the slavery thing, it was the Democrats that were more conservative. They were trying to tell their version of a story, something that wasn't. It was not the full thing. I think that, and I think that's an interesting show to how I think that politics should be these days, where you have nuance. There is not. It is not. These guys are always conservative. These guys are always liberal. I like that. I think that makes things much. It makes a much better system that's better for everybody.
And like I agree with that. I do think that the Democrats in this situation were being definitely more, I would say, slightly more biased than what
for sure.
they would, because you can't just teach slavery as the only cause of the Civil War, because it is more complex than just slavery. While that was arguably the main and biggest issue, there were smaller factors in it
that are still important.
Yeah, that are still important to discuss and to talk about. And I kind of like their idea of talking about how slavery actually played a role in sectionalism and disagreements over states' rights, which then led up to and into the Civil War. Because that kind of shows that slavery is an the big overlying factor for the Civil War. But yeah, there were other things as well.
All right. Well, anyone have any final remarks you want to make before we
Close this up.
close this up? Yeah.
Well, I think we had a lot of important discussions today. I think
Yeah.
we learned a lot about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And I hope that everybody learned something. Whether you're listening to this or whether you are at this very busy table with a lot of different computers and a lot of different note pages.
I just want to say it was very interesting. In my discussion, Leo's discussion, and Perrin's discussion, there was everything about young people. With me, it was Rich Brian. With you, it was the person who created
Esperanto.
And I think you can argue even with Nalin's, we're talking about the
edu-
education.
yeah.
Right.
I was gonna.
It's about the youth.
expand on that. Yeah.
Because we are the youth. The youth is powerful. The youth is interesting. The youth is...
We're the future.
We are the future.
Hopefully.
Plot twist.
Well.
Credits roll on the next episode.
To be continued.
Yep. Yes. Well,
I hope you learned.
This has been a walk in the woods.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We've had
Thank you.
Elliot, Leo,
Yeah, goodbye.
Nalin,
Farewell.
and myself, Perrin.
The fabulous host.
How do you say goodbye in Esperanto?
I don't know. Did you look it up?
We'll do that later.
We'll do that later.
Okay, goodbye in Esperanto.
Guten Tag.